Good afternoon. This is the Athens City Council Finance and Personnel Committee meeting, Wednesday, May 4th, 2016. It's approximately 12:11 p.m. On our agenda for Finance and Personnel is non-union compensation plan and then miscellaneous for whatever things we may have. We have been working on the non-union compensation plan, I think, since, October, November of last year. Been moving slowly forward, back and forth with our consultants, Clemens and Nelson, and the administration, council, auditor, and human resources, and I hope we're finally getting somewhere. I just want to start this off with just two questions. The plan that I have in front of me right here with the beautiful color highlighted spreadsheets and so on. It's a summary of proposed implementation cost scenarios and summation of the plan and various job classifications and so on. So my question to the administration is this the plan that you want to proceed forward with? I know it's not perfect. I know it's not everything that you would like it to be, but is this the one that you would like council to consider for adoption?
It is.
Okay. Now I have a question for the auditor. Total cost, 35% roll-up. It's I need cataract surgery also. $205,365.89 is the cost for the roll-up. That's what we're going to have to put out to get this thing, everyone up to parity and so on. Can the city afford it? Do we have the money?
Is that for you?
No, it's a one-time shot.
One time.
This is to get it going.
Yeah, no.
Well, I guess it depends on what your priorities are going to be. Half of that will come out of the general fund,
Okay.
which doesn't really have that kind of money. There are a couple other funds that also are very, very tight that will be hit hard with this. Problem is, we have run numbers, and we did it last time. We got this too late to do any adjustments that were made. So I can't even tell you if their numbers are exactly what we would come up with, first of all. And there have been changes in there. And we still don't get answers to our questions, like what vacant positions are going to be filled, because they're not included on this. If you see, they've listed positions that say vacant, and there's no money attached to it.
How would that affect the roll-up cost then?
Well, then we'd have to factor that salary for that position in there, which is not in their final. Does that make sense? If you go through,
well, the way I understand the roll-up is we're not...
the roll-up is what it is. Any position, right, whatever you're going to pay them, that's all your taxes, PERS, workers' comp, all that stuff.
Correct.
So, yeah.
So what I understand the roll-up is doing is looking at the various positions here and seeing what they're being paid, and it's making adjustments for that individual job classification. Is that?
Now the roll-up is the benefits cost on top of what the cost of the compensation is.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you look at this, they had this like on the front page. So to the right, the hourly rate increase, and then you annualize it, 2,080 hours. That's the cost for the raises. That cost is also then factored in when we do taxes and PERS. If you start making more money, we have to withhold more.
Right.
And so that's the roll-up.
I understand.
And
right.
then, so the total cost would be like $205,000.
$205,000.
An example might be if you're moving a position from part-time to full-time, you get immediately there's $17,000 added for insurance. There are a couple positions where that's happening. So you have a vacant position and it's not factored into the total cost, and you fill it and it's a full-time position, it becomes a significant dollar amount above what's the
Yeah,
bottom
we
line.
were told once before that they had two, in the plan, the current plan, there were two part-time positions, and then they wanted a full-time position. Well, that's not a wash. You know, two part-time people making half the full-time position, you still have to double the salary, and you have to add the $17,000 plus a little bit more onto it. It really triples the cost of those two part-time people. So it's not as simple as just saying we're replacing this or doing that. It appears that they've hired some people as part-time people, but they've got them listed as full-time. So when they get bumped up, you know, there's the cost there, but it just depends. You know, we have a lot of questions, and honestly, I haven't had time to go through the entire benefits package. You know, but there's been some adjustments. The years of service, some people got it, some people didn't. I just don't understand some of that. You know, and you know, the fairness, and this was what I was trying to stress last time, that Clemens Nelson can only look at these positions and what they have in writing. They don't know these people. They don't know what they actually do for the city, because a job description and what you actually do is not, it can't always be put in writing. Someone else can't understand that, and it needs to be looked at, you know, by the individuals, and to do what's right by them. And I'm not a person in favor of painting everybody with the same paintbrush, because that is not fair.
All right. I understand that issue, and that's kind of separate from the cost right here. Okay, but
Well, it's going to be at least that. If you do this, take it as it is.
Okay.
And half will be out of the general fund, and there's one or two other funds that are going to have a hard time and might not be able to, you know.
Which funds are those off the top of your head?
Streets and
Streets.
community center. But, you know,
Okay.
that's the thing. We don't know how to calculate this, because we don't really know, you know, what's going to happen with this. There's still some questions just by looking at it the way it is.
Okay.
So the other question is, we got really two spreadsheets. So this bring to cost, if no cap, then the calculation is only $73,000 increase. So that's why I sent an email earlier and said, I don't really know what's being presented here. So are we given this new long version, but then we've got this shorter version? So is this going to be it? You know, these last pages? They've taken out the
The shorter
service?
version was just another way to look at removing, you know, time and position, you know, to look at, here's what it would cost if we just eliminate that completely. Likely not the best way to go, but this was one more thing that, as Clemens and Nelson, just to be in full disclosure, Clemens and Nelson as a third party would sit there and they don't look at the person, they look at the position. And so with that last one that you're looking at, that $73,000, that's what it would cost without taking into account years of service in position in comparison to what we've been grappling with for the past 4 months.
So is that what you're asking for? I guess that's when you know, Chairman Reisner asked what you're presenting. Are you presenting all the years of service, or are you presenting just bringing them up to the minimum?
We're presenting both, you know, so that we can see the difference between what it would look like without it and what it looks like with it, and what it's going to cost the city if we remove years in the position versus taking that into account, which we have grappled with that for a long time as well, as I just mentioned a minute ago, to include how do we frame that? And this is where, you know, right or wrong or indifferent, Clemens and Nelson is looking to us like, you're taking a process and morphing it into something through so many different iterations of what you're doing. Through my lens, I'm having to sit there and go, is it for years, it's not years of service, it's years in position, and making sure it's years in that position regardless of maybe other years that someone has worked in other positions below, and making sure what is the best size fits all as we're going through this process. And it's hard, you know, to do this fairly. to where you're trying to eliminate any biases as you're going through this process. And Auditor Heck, I sympathize with you. I get it, and I know what's happening with this whole process. But we've got to get somewhere to move forward in this process, because I just feel like, and in all disclosure too, this is normally a process that takes a year or whatever, but we still have, I think, in front of us a point at which we look at these two scenarios, and these are just being presented to those who are the ones, holding the purse strings. Is here's the $70,000 plus $79,000, and here's with years of service in that position as we go forward.
Well, I have two comments on that, and I understand. I just didn't know what you were trying to show and what you're actually asking for today. I have the one issue that I think should be resolved is that people who've been in their position but were underpaid are only being brought up to that minimum. I would suggest that they deserve at least a probationary increase onto that. You understand what I'm saying? So somebody's in there, and Clemens Nelson's clearly showing that they were underpaid for their position, that they are then being brought up just to the minimum when they've actually been here, whether it's a year or 10 years or whatever. They should have a probationary increase because you have, for example, someone who was just hired this year, who started out, who was high enough in the pay range where he was given a higher rate than the minimum, because that's allowed in our current ordinance. And so you gave him the minimum for this based on this plan. So then I have someone in my office who isn't even making that, who's been there for, left for a short time, but been there, almost 3 years, and who's only being brought up to that minimum. So in a couple months, that person who just came on this year will be making more than this person in my office who is only being brought up to the minimum in this plan. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
So I just think there's so many things that need to be looked at. We aren't really included in this process. I got somebody in my office that worked in HR, has her master's degree for 20 years, and, it's given to us, and then we're in the position of questioning and, asking all these questions. And it just, like you said, this should be a longer process. I'm not in favor of rushing this along at all. Financially, I think council needs to keep in mind that, the non-union got an additional 1% last year, and they got 2% at the beginning of this year, and then to give some of these bumps, substantial bumps, to people in the middle of the year this year, I just think you need to, make sure you've really reviewed everybody and looked at it, fairly for everybody who's involved. And there's a lot of little things like that. And it's just, morale was thrown in my face last year. Talk about morale. When you got people sitting in the same office space that are not being treated really fairly, in my mind, I just think that we owe it to our people to look at it on an individual basis. When you're changing something in the middle of the road, like this is a big change from what we've worked under. I've been an auditor for 12 years. I was on council for 2 years before that. We always had nine pay grades. And so to go from 9 to 12 and start spreading people out and making these adjustments is a big change. And the majority of people that are in here have been here for quite a while. And I think that some of them are the ones that are going to get hurt. Some of the newer ones are going to get hurt. It's that same old probationary issue that came up last year where someone was hired later and ended up making more than the person before. I don't know who could say that that's okay or fair, and I think it needs to be taken into account when you're looking at this, and it needs to be looked at by the individuals. That's my opinion. And the thing is, the lower one, it will be about $98,000 plus, just based on their figures. We haven't had time to run the figures, so.
Okay.
As opposed to 205. So I can't tell you off the top of my head.
So
how
somewhere
much
between 100,000 and 205,000, depending on whether we A or B, what we're looking at.
If you're not going to include the vacant position.
Yeah, that's the other thing. So we don't know. If those get added in, that's an additional cost.
Well, I understand the thing about the the vacant positions, but I think we're kind of getting off track here.
Right.
I mean, what we have here is we have this document, this plan here, and the question before us is this the one, which one do we proceed to council, and can we afford it?
I think
Councilmember Fall.
the vacant positions is kind of, I agree, something that we don't need to kind of muddy the water, because if we hired the vacant positions with or without that, it's still going to cost us money because we're hiring personnel. So I think that needs to be put on the side, and this, as Jeff said, look at the documentation we have. Knowing that when you hire people, that does cost. But when you hire people, you can also start over, and we don't have to worry so much about years of service and that, because they would be hired in knowing what they're going to be paid.
Well, when we prepare the personnel budget for the city that's presented by the mayor for council to approve, all those vacant positions are put in there, because you have to budget for that. You can't just say, oh, wait, we're going to go ahead and fill this. We need
That's
another
right. They're in the budget.
$50,000.
They're in the budget now. We know what the figure is.
No.
No, they're not. No, there's a lot of, because of all the changes,
Not a lot.
reclassifications and things like that.
Since
There's
2015 budget?
You have two new positions, administrator and kind of an assistant, city engineer.
Yeah. There's more that,
Reclassification, so it's the executive assistant.
And, thank you, and that executive assistant position is going away. It's just going to be completely
well, then
removed.
that's the thing that we need to know, is it needs to be taken out of there, so we
I
know
thought
not to
had.
budget it.
You know,
It is on this.
I thought it had been. If not, it will be done, but it was, no, there was cleaning up in positions that are being completely removed.
Like I said, we did not have much time to review this,
Okay.
so,
The other thing I want to share real quick, too, I want to,
Current renovation, you don't have the APW project that was just hired.
Well, there's always going to be a couple of things that we don't
It's a
have.
living
And I
document.
thought you asked how much is this going to cost?
I did.
Okay, and so,
No, I didn't. No. I said, can we afford it? That's what I said. Can we afford it, yes or no?
okay.
And I heard yes. It's going to be tight, but yes, we can. That's what I got from...
well, actually, I'm not sure we can in those other two funds. We can in the general fund. Is that a smart thing for us to take that kind of money out of there? I don't know.
I had to ask the administration. Is it?
At a minimum, at a very minimum, bringing cost to minimum, I feel should occur. But what you do have is the same wage compression issue, that you bring someone up to minimum, not all the positions, and then you get a vacancy and you rehire, the person coming in is going to make the same as the person who might have been working 6 to 8 years. That's why 10 years, who knows, we show you this. I heard what the auditor stated about a big change, although previously I thought I had heard that that you were fine with the 12 different categories in terms of...
Oh, I am.
Okay.
I'm fine with it, but it is a big change, and it affects all these positions because somebody's just picking and choosing where they should go, and that affects the people they work with when they were like in the same pay range before, and now, I mean, there's a couple positions that have been moved up and one that was moved down since the last one, and it just makes it hard for us to budget, and we haven't had time to really go in and budget for this one.
That's what we're seeking, is the budgeting component from the auditor's office. And we started from the beginning saying not everyone's going to be happy with this. We're not going to be able to make everyone happy. I actually went through on the years of service, and it was when that person was appointed to that position. We have paper trail on some, not so much on other. Continually tweaking this and looking at individuals and who's in that position is exactly why we brought in Clemens Nelson, to have a level of objectivity. I get it. Not everyone in my division is happy. Not everybody's happy across the board. But at least this gets us to better standards of hiring and then continuing on. And can come back to council next year to say, for when we budget for 2016, what do you want to give? If you go with just the minimum now, Will you be willing to give a percentage increase and some additional bump for a years of service? Or do you want to take that and attempt to do that here? And I know that there's been discrepancies about years of service, so.
I want to circle around real quick because we mentioned this last time we all met when we had Clemens and Nelson here, and it's the probationary period bump. My new policy moving forward is that we don't do that anymore. We just, again, my feelings are someone is hired, this is the pay that this person's being hired into, they have a probationary period. I'm not getting rid of probation. I think that's an important component to have in any hiring process. But at the end of that promotion or that probationary period, your pay just rolls along right where it was, as opposed to getting a 5% increase. That's part of what is throwing things out of kilter too, constantly, is this.
5% is high, and that was
high.
changed since I
It's
became
high,
auditor.
and
That was not my suggestion.
Auditor,
It used to be 3.
I'm with
But
you, and I think that that's the
benefits package
thing.
we just got still has a 3% increase.
Probationary increase is still in there of 3%.
I think there were some items in the benefits package that were up for discussion, but it was my understanding that the decision had been made to remove
It's been
probationary.
removed.
Other than how do we deal with the people that have been hired? And they were promised, they were brought in, understand whether
Right.
they were going to have that probationary period increase.
For 1 year, for this time period, an individual was hired in knowing that, this is great, I'm going to be getting a probationary increase, and that would be unfair. I think that would be bad practice for this year to sit there and yank it away when they're going, this is going to be, this is nice. But come July 1, if this goes through or whenever, that's going to be history in my mind. I don't think
Those
that's.
are some of the things I'd like to know. I'm a supervisor. I've had people in my office that have worked for me for quite a few years, and I'd like to know how they're going to be affected. I guess I feel like I have a right to ask that.
You totally do, Kathy. No, and I mentioned this the last time we were in this room having this meeting, and I said it then. I said, I don't get it. I don't get why someone is being hired, and because you've gone
We
through
did
the
discuss
probationary
that.
period.
And that's a decision that, you can make. But now you're saying it's going away, but it's still in here now. But I was never told that it wasn't going to go away till next year. I mean, I don't know. That's the thing. I think that's something people need to know, especially when they're hiring people. So if they hire somebody in October, November, December this year, and it's in the current ordinance that they still get 3%, but then all of a sudden they take it out in January, do those people not get it? Do all the supervisors know this? There's just a lot of things about this that, I have questions. I'm just kind of looking forward.
It's one element that fits under getting this or something approved. That's why, sure, nobody knows. How could you know? Because this thing isn't approved yet.
Right.
So
I just implied in the question, can we afford it, I guess the question back is, what does it cost?
Okay.
So, for instance, this current rendition of the spreadsheet moved the solid waste inspector position up to a higher pay grade. So now that person is going to cost more. Plus, there's in the non-staffing ordinance an additional vacant solid waste control inspector. Or is that going to be filled? That's almost a $60,000 to $70,000 total cost for that extra position.
But that's not part of the roll-up and such that we're talking about.
It is, because it is at a higher pay grade than it was budgeted. It is more money.
Yes, but that's, right now, anytime you hire somebody, whether it's at the new pay grade, the old pay grade, or the middle pay grade, or the unicorn pay grade, it doesn't matter. It's going to cost more money. I think what we're trying to focus on is the roll-up and this sort of thing to get us up to where we get to start hiring people at more money. It's just like when we give a 1% pay increase for a year. If you hire that person the next year, they're already kind of out a higher, because everybody's gone with that 1% pay increase. So that's, I think, what the question on the table is. And I think that the hiring practices and whether these positions are going to be filled or not filled is a different budgetary discussion.
Excuse me, not quite. The problem is, we've already budgeted for positions for this year. There's a certain amount of money in the personnel lines for every department, okay? So, yes, if we fill a vacant position, it's already budgeted for. However, if we fill it with a higher costing position, that's not budgeted. That's the difference. It's not already budgeted, and just hiring somebody into a vacant position doesn't necessarily cost us, like you said. But there's a lot of vacant positions in here that have been changed and moved up, and they weren't budgeted at that rate. So that's the cost. When we calculate how much this will cost us, we take the personnel budget, which is many spreadsheets long, and go in and make those changes, and we take what was, when we say, you know, like the $205,000, that's not how much it costs, that's the additional cost. But we can't calculate that if we don't know if those positions are in there. The additional positions and the additional cost. That $205,000 is additional to what we've already got budgeted, is what that is. It's additional to what we've already budgeted. So if we've budgeted for an empty position, yeah, it's already budgeted for, and we get that. But when we're moving someone out of a general secretary into an administrative assistant, then that's an additional cost up there, unless it is an additional cost because it's a higher pay rate. So even if you decide to take out that general secretary, it's going to cost money because you're going to pay that person more in this new position. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and then it costs even more if you move someone up and then also fill that position. Then you're paying, you have to budget for that other higher position entirely. So it's not as simple as just saying it costs money. Yeah, it costs money when we hire somebody. But most of it is already in the budget, but not all of it. So what we're trying to figure out is what's not already in the budget. That's what we have to look at, are those unappropriated balances and how much additional we're paying for this plan. Okay?
Can I go over this by item, and then you can provide the numbers? Based on, I'm going on the yellows, yes, if this is approved, we plan on hiring an assistant director of public works, and that's usually split between 3 to 4 funds, water, sewer, street, some sort. Yes, the instrument technician should already be budgeted because the instrument technician began this year, or was budgeted into this year. It's a vacant position. That person left to Ohio University for more money and benefits. Not at that rate. Fine. A little bit of adjustment there, whatever it was previously. Labor supervisor, APR, we plan on.
Okay, excuse me, so we don't have a color copy.
Oh,
Okay. So, can you give a little more detail about where you are with this topic? We don't have yellow lines.
I can go back and start again. I'm going on the yellows, which are deemed the vacant positions. The second page, Assistant Director of Public Works, was, if this is approved, plan on hiring. And that's split between the different divisions that you've already got some models. Although I think we're asking, Laura, I think you've been included in some of those conversations about the 33, 33, 31. The instrument technician has the current position, now vacant, should be in the budget, but at whatever higher rate. The labor supervisor of APR, yes, we are requesting that additional position. The TGC tech, yes, council is requesting that additional position. I don't know if it was in the budget, but it's in the money's been appropriated. And the administrative assistant for the auditor, whether or not you're going to be placed that. The only one I see missing is what I thought was going to be a secretary to the mayor, is not included here, and that's vacant. Hasn't been hired, may not be hired this year.
I'm sorry, I lost you.
Yeah, where is that one?
I don't see it.
I don't see it either.
I mean, it fell off, so I'm putting it right underneath where the other, administrative assistant for the auditor, executive assistant, legal secretary. So.
Yes, project assistant is not there.
I had a quick question, just to muddy the water. When all this, it looks like a lot of people are going to be bumped up a bit to a lot of bids. How does the increase is everybody get their scheduled increase in wages, their raises that we have put into, like the non-contract, the non-union?
The non-union is determined by council every year.
Okay, well, what I'm saying, you were talking about how last year they got a 1% pay rate increase, and this year they're supposed to get 2%. I'm wondering, are they still going to get 2% and what that is percentage is based on also?
We've already
What?
received this year's.
Okay.
But those percentage increases are actually under the purview of Finance and Personnel. Finance and Personnel sets those
Right.
pay raises. That's not an
I mean, this
administrative
is
function.
kind
We
of
can
like
certainly
a
advise.
whopper pay raise for some people, and it seems that maybe we'll have to take that into account looking at further, in the next year's pay raise and such, too.
Well, at the rate that we're moving on this thing, we'll be working on the 2016 budget, 17, 18. What Clemens and Nelson said, it usually takes a year to get this thing done.
A year for their work.
Okay, well, we're making up for them. Okay, so where are we? You have a question,
I just
Councilmember
did have a question back
Nicely?
to the unappropriated balances, because if I understand right, the auditor said that we would be tight with the general fund, perhaps okay with the general fund, and then streets and community center might be a little bit tighter. Do we know what the, and I neglect to have brought my unappropriated balance sheets, what the unappropriated balances are in those three accounts, the general, the streets, and the community center?
Well, yeah, we just did a new one, but I don't think I brought it. The part of the other issue is, this will be another little finance lesson, is it's not just the unappropriated balance, it's the fund balance, which we are struggling greatly now.
I know with the community center.
With
we
those
have been.
two other
Yep,
funds.
yep.
Because the money comes in, weekly throughout the year. We've got big costs, street paving, things like that coming out. And that fund balance, it's an issue right now. It's a big issue for streets, and it is an issue for community center. And we have these extra workers' comp payments this year, which I will add, though, we have been so fortunate and had these reduced payments and credits. So we went ahead and paid all of last year's what we owed, which ended up being about half. We had, I don't know if you remember, $117,000 that we got in rebate last year, which is about half of what we owed. So we paid the full amount that we owed for last year instead of splitting it up like they're offering people 50% of last year, 50 this year, and then 50% of 16. So in the fall, we have to pay 50% of this year's, and then in December we have to pay whatever we decide, a quarter, a monthly, or half a year, whatever amount for 17. So we have additional costs this year, but we've been very lucky in that respect.
Right.
But those kind of payments in the spring have always hurt the street fund. And we're coming up on high season right now, and we've got projects that need a $440,000 that they can only put a purchase order in for $5,000 because the money is not in there. You can't encumber it. It's not in the bank. And the unappropriated balances, while we do a pretty decent job projecting that revenue, that's an estimate. That's what we think at the beginning of the year. Our new tax laws are going to affect what our revenue is for the year. And, it makes me more nervous this year than I've been in the last several years as to how our revenue will actually change throughout the year.
Right.
Question?
And the one other point that I wanted to make was where we are with the bigger picture of moving this package along. We're looking for, hopefully, if we can work out all these details, a July 1 implementation. But for the vacant positions, if I understand our city process right, if we did go to fill some of those positions that Service Safety Director Mosley just outlined, we'd probably be 2 to 3 months off from hiring. Would that be correct? So we'd be looking at, and I know that there's still a long-range budgetary implication, but for this fiscal year, you're probably looking at October or November, so 2 months' worth of a salary for any vacant positions.
But we have to budget for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If somebody
Understand
works,
that.
we have to pay, and we have to pay them on
But
schedule.
not instantly a $70,000 for one vacant position filled. We're talking about 2
Right.
months of $70,000.
Well, we adjusted our
Yeah.
estimates for 6 months.
Okay.
We already adjusted that, and so all of these vacant positions, if they're going to be filled, it should probably, I don't know, how long it will take.
I would imagine
But we
it might
have to
be
budget
September
for it. We just have to.
at the earliest. maybe
It can
October?
be earlier than that.
It could be, okay.
Yeah. They need to be budgeted for, but we would only budget for half a year.
Okay.
But they have to be budgeted for.
5 to 6 vacant positions, 2 of which have been vacant for years. There's additional one, I believe, in the auditor's office and in the mayor's office.
Is there any, this is totally aside, I hate to do it, what is the point of keeping a position that hasn't been filled for years there and budgeting money for it when the money could be used for something else in the general fund?
Now, when I just said that, I know that the auditor utilizes hers in a transition planning for future hires, retirees in her office, and the mayor has ideas too.
The previous mayor did that quite a bit also. Part-time position was hired that was not in the staffing ordinance,
Yeah.
but that's the money that was used until it was a year or more before it got put
Yeah,
into
but
the
it seems like it would give us a better knowledge of what the budget was and what funds we have available if the money was there in the general fund, and if you later on decided, well, I need it for this or that, just come to council and say, well, I need this or that, now here's the money for it, and this is where it's at, and we look at it and say, yeah, by golly, it really is there. Sure, that's a great reason. Here you go. 3 readings and it's done. I mean, it's much more transparent that way. I mean, this is, as chair of finance and personnel, I'm just spouting out
last year
here.
to remove that position, so it just stayed in there.
Okay.
Although now,
Right.
depending on what happens with the people in my office, I don't know that I'm not going to hire someone else if,
Right.
rather than continue to ask someone to do 2 jobs and then be paid less than the person next to them. So,
Okay. Understand.
but I will say this, as far as the years of service on this one, it's not. Some people are in reclassifications are getting it and some aren't. And I really am not comfortable putting names out there, but, it's just a fact. It's not really what it should be, and my office would be happy to sit down and go over it, but, we don't have that relationship with the mayor's administration, so.
What we're trying to avoid here is indeed that where we're talking about individuals. We're trying to keep it to what Clemens Nelson's review and the recommendations back to us, particularly as it relates to years of service. The reclassifications were done by the Civil Service Commission. You should have a copy of this. That was completed an hour ago. So that has been met with full agreement by the Civil Service Commission. So that does change some things. But those were the reclassifications that they have approved. We started this whole process saying not everybody's going to be happy, and it's clear not everybody's going to be happy. But we're just at least attempting to bring things more in alignment in terms of the wage structure for the city.
Councilmember Fall?
Well, as I said last time, the reason why you get an outside consultant is so that personalities don't come into it. And I understand the fairness issue, but does it come down to how good of a lobbyist your supervisor is on whether you're going to be included with the years of service? Some people are more aggressive, some people are less aggressive, and that's why personally I feel more comfortable looking at it from an outside point of view, because those sort of things can get very messy and hurt people's feelings even more, because then they're like, well, that wasn't fair and I should have had better and blah, blah, blah. And if there is a third party that's looked at it and said, this is what it should look like, this is what other cities look like, and there is some wiggle room, that's, I think, a fairer process. And yeah, nobody's, it's government and people aren't going to be happy and some people are going to be, so.
Well, my comment to that is they're looking at what's given them. They're not coming up with this on their own. They're looking at this after having discussions with people in the city. All these changes that are made are based on individuals, who decided. They didn't decide to reclassify some of these people. I'm sure that was, suggested, and that's fine. However, I would like to know why reclassification for the general secretaries in the mayor's office includes years of service, and in EPW it does not. If you look at this chart, that's how it is. So, if you're reclassifying from a general secretary to another position, and some of them have years of service, and that one doesn't.
That's what, again.
So I'm not just fighting for my office. I'm looking at this, and no, I don't love everything in here. And I think, wow, that person's really getting, But I'm not arguing all of that. And in the end, it doesn't matter. And I'll live with it. But some of these things I feel are blatantly unfair to people in the same positions. Like I'm fighting for these secretaries that aren't even in my office or my building, for that matter, because it's not right. You understand that, what I'm saying about that? Because, that years of service was given some of these general secretaries being reclassified, but not another one. And maybe you have a reason,
You've had a
but I
change
guess
in
I'd
these
like to see it.
offices, and you've had a change in personnel. And the one individual that you're speaking of, or in that division, there used to be 3 people as support in this office. About 2 years ago, 1 person left. That's when I feel that the change in this occurred. So I made that decision. I made the decision on the
I'm
years
not
of
opposed to
service.
that at all.
There was before, there were 3 different individuals handling different components. And yes, we had a director of that division come to and say, well, they should get it all the way back to when they were hired. That's where I had to remove myself and knowing individuals and say, it's when the situation changed and the individual took on these additional duties. And I believe the Civil Service Commission approved that one.
They approved all reclassifications.
So yeah, it's not without
Approving.
pay.
I'm not saying, I have no issue with the reclassifications. But why, when you say it should be based on when their position changed, I'd like to know, why that person, in that office, the duties changed so much, why they're not getting any years of service when, did these other reclassifications actually, was any study done to see when their jobs changed?
There was quite a bit of information provided. Again, this individual was in a position of, I could go into the reclassification and be in a higher bracket, but not going to be credited for the years of service, or remain in my previous one and have the years of service, get a bump now, but then be restricted in my future. So that was a very interesting one. And I don't know if they're both in there or if one's removed. So.
Okay, I think we've beat that
And I
horse.
tried to avoid talking about individual positions, and this is where we are. That's why when you get into years of service and how, interpretations, that it becomes the tweaks and gets to a level of uncomfortableness. And so again, both are out there. At least the cost of minimum, knowing that you're still going to have wage compression issues to address in the future.
What happens if we don't do anything on this how is that going to affect things?
What would be the direction from council for addressing wage disparity issues in the future?
In compression.
This says, this has it has the positive of it being done by an outside person, which I don't get comfortable, talking about certain people deserve certain types of raises and such, because, I'm not a supervisor of any of them, and that's why it makes sense to go through an outside consultant. I don't know how you answer questions. One person, I think that this is a fairer way of doing it than looking at individual people. And the years of service seems like it's the sticking point. And so I guess that's the chief question that we have to grapple.
Yeah.
The years,
Well, you got to be on camera.
and that's just fine.
And what is your name and what do you do?
My name is Jennifer Galbraith. I am the HR director for the city of Athens.
You never saw What's My Line.
Again, that's
Probably
before my
before our
time.
time.
It's before everybody's time.
With the years of service, when this project was originally presented, if you can remember, years of service was to help us get to the midpoint. Those individual When you get to 2 years, we move you to the box, however that was determined. So that is a methodology that Clemens and Nelson uses. It's something that they use with every city that they work with. That's how that came up. So because moving to midpoint would be fairly expensive, we decided, okay, we'll use years of service, start moving people where they needed to be within their pay range, but do it in a way that would be cost effective for the city. And there lies the problem, is, okay, now, how do we define that? And I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if I can speak on behalf of the mayor or Surface Safety Director Mosley, but the second rendition from Clemens and Nelson in March was after further review, talking to department heads, getting additional information, would be a valid document. That's all I have to say.
Thank
Can
you.
I ask a question?
Yes, you may ask a question.
Thank you.
I'm asking for clarification as well as to whether the implementation of this is to be in July, effective July 1st, I believe. So what I would like clarification about is if I hit a year of service in August, say I've been here 9 years and 11 months, and I hit 10 years in August, am I to understand then I do not get a bump because it's a one-time thing?
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure that's clear. Thank you.
Mayor?
I want to, since Clemens and Nelson has been mentioned several times in this, and the length of time that they normally go through this process or have gone through this process, it's certainly worth making sure this is on record, and that is that Clemens and Nelson came in under a $15,000 contract.
You misunderstood. We've gone over.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
We've gone over.
Has exceeded what was initially contracted, significantly exceeded what has been initially contracted, so that they put in more time than what I think most people have thought of as being a 4-month process. I mean, they're still in communication, trying to help figure this out, even to this day. So they have been involved as long as this has been going on, so which is a good thing, by the way. Just want that on the record, that they're still engaging.
Other questions from council members? President, nicely.
I did have a question about the text document, some details of that, because if this is what would also be adopted at the same time. One of them was the question raised earlier about whether the 3% is still to be there with the probationary. 3% does look like it's still on in paragraph B on page 24. But on the very last page, it just mentions probationary period, so maybe one or the other of those. That's something to clarify. I did have two other questions. One is 21B, and
Page 21?
page 24 is where,
Okay.
paragraph 3 is where the 3% compensation is still listed. So I just wondered if they wanted to try and clarify that. And then 21B, that same paragraph about 3 sentences earlier, it's just my not being familiar with how the language reads. It says new full-time 3/4 and permanent part-time employees may be hired by elected officials at a rate of up to 25%. Okay, through the assigned pay grade. Okay, so that's unused.
25 is through the pay grade.
Through the pay grade, not 25%. Okay. All right, that clarifies that one. And then 21D was my other one. And that may have been, it's going to take me a moment to find that one. So if there are other questions, I'll come back to it in a minute. I've lost what my question is on that one, so never mind. Oh, here, wait a minute.
Here it is.
Nope, I don't have it. Sorry. I'll find it in a minute, maybe.
What has been changed in terms of military leave?
I'm glad you asked that question because I was going to chime in on that one. Currently, it's 21 days with paid leave. That actually falls under the Ohio Revised Code. Under our union contracts, it's 30 days, I believe, that they are allotted of paid leave. I think in today's world, when we attended the ESGR award ceremony in which the city was awarded being a military member friendly city, one of the things that was conveyed, and myself being retired military, it resonated well with me in that in today's world and military operations being so fluid and people being called on for unknown amounts of time, I thought that what is fair is that since the union receives 30 days paid leave to go and protect our nation's resources, that our non-union employees should also. We currently have 3 non-union employees who are getting 21 days of paid leave. Actually, we have 3 reservists total. Thank you.
It is under the ORC. We talked about this previously, but it was pretty impactful. And as you heard, the mayor is a veteran. They indicated that the Guard is being called on more and more and more, hashtag RNC. I mean, they're just different things. I think they even referenced that. Because the enlisted component is, the numbers are down. So the Guard, so we feel strongly that should be afforded for the current and future.
Yeah, our active duty forces are stretched thin, and they're being essentially backfilled in theaters of operation with our Guards persons as well as reservists. So.
Right.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah.
Mayor and I have talked about this more than once. And I don't have an issue with changing this, but even though it said 21 days, which was what it is in the ORC, we only ever had one non-union person that was called up. And my office has always accepted a letter from the Service Safety Director to pay them for that full time. Until last year, not sure why we didn't get it. I was notified by, the payroll administrator that this person had exceeded their time. The request was not put in. That's not something we can just go ahead and do without some kind of documentation to request that. So it's not that we have anyone until this one last time that didn't actually get paid for their full time that they were, deployed. We do have one issue with this is why is this in any federal fiscal year? We are not on a federal fiscal year. Who's going to track that?
We can change that.
Yeah, even the ORC goes by calendar year, so if we could make it calendar year, it would be a lot easier.
We'll change that. And the intent of this, again, is at least just to codify this so that it's out there and it's always there. Auditor, I appreciate the fact that you have, and we did have conversations about this, that you're flexible. That's not my intent. This is now, I just want something to where we have it in law, to where we can always refer back to it, which I think also makes it easier, as we know that who our military members are moving forward.
Because that could change. We could have other military members that aren't in a union that this could change. But as I said, we would always accept something in writing, and we paid them for it. But so it's not like we haven't been paying them for all these years. But that's not our decision to make when the ordinance reads something else. So we have, and like I said, we agreed. I agree with the 30 days. That's one of those things that the non-union should have the same benefit as the union personnel. So yeah, if you just want to change that calendar year, that would be great.
Never nice.
Sorry about that, we will do that.
There's a little,
I finally found the long missing piece, the phrase that I didn't understand, and this is just a text review perhaps. It's the very last page, so it would be 26. I think it's unnumbered, and it's under probationary period. And it's just, I'm not sure, it says the language, all current employees would be under a probationary period.
yeah, I wondered about that too.
And
I
I'm
have it highlighted.
taking that literally and going, does that mean everybody?
Everybody's not going to be on probation.
So maybe they just mean all current employees who move to a new position.
That could
Maybe
be,
that's a
yeah.
redundant, just
At
an
first
extra
I was-
phrase, so just something to check.
Well, it should also
Yes,
be for new
yeah,
hires.
it's the very
Does it
last
say
page.
that?
Or maybe it means to say new
It
hires.
should be
I-
new, it should be
New
new
hires.
hires.
It would
Yeah.
be both.
Please don't think with this Clemens and
Current
Nelson
employees?
plan that now we're going to make everyone go back onto probationary
That's
period.
what I mean.
Like that, I mean, if somebody had been promoted under the promotion,
And it's all in yellow, too.
Right,
I'm saying
so,
it could affect a current employee if they were promoted.
Current employees who move.
move to a new
makes sense.
position.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
taken care of, and that's why I think the mayor's saying it might mean all new hires and current employees who move to a new position, maybe.
Make sure we got that right.
I have other comments for that lower in that section. I think it would be smarter for council to change the wording below that, where it says that employees at the rate of pay that is in excess of the maximum can receive a lump sum, that's fine, in an amount equal to the general increase. I would just put as approved by council. in the
I'm
past.
sorry, which paragraph are you on?
Oh, well, it's, okay, so you got your 21D, and then you have this exceeding maximum pay rates. The first paragraph under that, it's kind of right in the
Right
middle.
here. Okay.
I would cross out amount equal to the general increase and just put as approved by council. I think
okay.
financially, council, if they can, they'll give them the same amount, but they shouldn't be bound by that. And in the past, it hasn't happened for a few times, but in the past, and I know that Debbie Walker can attest to this, sometimes people over the max did not get a raise at all. Sometimes they got a lesser percentage. And I just think approved by council, they can approve the full amount or they can not. And that gives them more flexibility depending on the financial situation.
So there's no.
That same wording is down under number 2, then below that. People who will reach the max and maybe go over with council's increase, I would just take out equal to and just put as approved by council, a lump sum as approved by council.
Running out of ink.
I have the Ryan's request. I think we're still on this, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Any other, does anyone else see any changes and corrections? Okay.
I'll try and be brief. I apologize. Under Section 20, promotion, lateral transfer, and demotion of current employees, I think there's inconsistency in the language between what is a classification and a position. If you're promoted into a classification, that's one thing. If you're demoted, and then if your lateral movement is to a position. So I'm confused about what we're calling a position and what we're calling a classification. Also, in the middle of the paragraph on demotion, it says that demotions may be subject to appeal to the Municipal Service Commission. I'm wondering if you're not part of the Municipal Service Commission, if there's any appeal. Are there any non-union grievance procedures, or do we have?
The Civil Service Commission has met in the past regarding someone who is grieving what was occurring in their position. I assume that they would still go through, but we can ask.
If you're not part of civil service,
If you're not part of civil service.
No, I'm not part of civil service, I'm not in civil service.
So what's your
Me
grievance
either.
procedure? I have a grievance. How
At
do I
will.
proceed?
I do not know that there is any. I would contend there isn't.
So you're just,
Debbie's
Okay.
either. Sorry.
Actually, in the past, we've asked that something be brought up, because Laura's not the only person in my office who is unclassified. And there are many offices, next door to me, law director's office, they have no one classified in that office of 60. So we would like a grievance procedure for unclassified personnel.
So essentially, you would have no at-will positions. You would not afford an elected official the opportunity to determine who they wanted in those positions. And they're pretty specific positions. We're not talking about rank and file. So. And actually, it would even affect other positions that have their own appointing authority.
So what happened? Okay, we're getting off the topic here. I'm not going to get. That's a different discussion.
Okay.
I got to hold myself back. Okay, we've been at this for an hour now. Have we heard enough?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, I think, what are the next steps? I mean,
Well, I'm going to recommend we have a first reading on Monday.
With it-
Which scenario?
With edits, yeah. And
Well, yes.
Which scenario are we,
The one that you like the most?
Okay. We're on getting edits and what have you to the clerk.
Say that again, I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry, we'll work on getting the edits and edited documents to the clerk.
Councilmember,
Did I hear correctly, if I understand the process from Clemens Nelson, that the years of service accommodation offers us, it costs more money, but it offers us more spread so that there isn't wage compression? I think. I mean, just as something for consideration on which package to go with. There was a reason for putting in the years of service as an option for one of the package, for one of the plans.
the years of service was one of the items negotiated by us with Clemens Nelson. Negotiation is probably not the right term to use, but in working this process through, one of the things Clemens and Nelson would, again, the $73,000 is just, bam, everyone starts here, and not taking into account any years of service whatsoever.
Okay.
But again, with the auditor and thinking this through, recognizing years of service, it does help further decompress the way this process is going to work over this year and next as we work our way through this process. It's recognizing the years of service that as best we can.
So that's another question that we've had different answers to. Is this going to be a one-time thing with the years of service as they stand right now, and it's not going to happen moving forward? Well, I guess Laura already asked that. So if you're going to meet one of those, years of service milestones in a few months or something, then it doesn't matter? Are we going to do this again? And then is it just going to be the annual raises that council gives everyone? If you do like the short version, or either version, but you just bring everybody up to where you're bringing them, and then that years of service progression is not going to happen ever again.
Well, when Clemens and Nelson came forward to us, I don't remember when, this is probably a month ago or so, and this resonated with me, is that, when you're looking at market value of jobs and where people should be, that this isn't a static thing to where, okay, boom, this is it, and now we just live with this for 20 years, or however many years, which is basically what we have done. in the past, so this is to revisit this as they recommended to revisit every 3 years. I think that 3 to 5 years. I'm getting hand signals from across the room. 5 years, thank you. To revisit it 5 years and look to see on the economy, the grand scale, but also, and you brought this forward, and I agree with this, is that don't just compare ourselves with statutory cities, compare ourselves with charter cities. I do caution that there are some differences in jobs and job titles from a charter city to a statutory city, but those are all things that we can do 5 years down the road, look to see where we're at, and make adjustments again.
So not for 5 years. So this is a one-time bump, and we're looking at 2 plans here. So one or the other, and then, yeah, I understood the same thing about the years of service and the compression. I see 5 years from now as that kind of being an issue as far as compression, if we're trying to relieve that at all. But that would be the question. So that's the other thing. So are you saying that this is going to be a one-time deal and we're not going to use that years of service calculation moving forward?
Right. Everybody kind of misunderstood and we're interpreting that as steps, but that is not what's being recommended at this time.
I'm just curious, because the steps are what was taken out about 3.5 years ago, that we used to have. And do they not recommend steps, or did you talk to them about that?
I think we did, and believe
Does
it or not,
the university or anybody else still use that?
I'm not sure. It was interesting because what this does when they place these people in these classifications, the different employees in these different positions, there's a top out, and that's expected to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was in the steps too. There was a midpoint and a max in the steps. We had steps, and our clerk was maxed out and wasn't the only one. So there's always going to be that.
Sure.
Right.
Talked about the opportunity that then if that person wants to earn more, then they may seek promotion and go into a different position that would have a different title. But they're pretty firm on actually having a maximum in a position.
Well, like I said, we always had that.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
But the steps, I mean, there were people who lost out on that step process because it changed and they weren't through their steps, 3 years ago and things like that. And although it was kind of a double increase a year, if they got the annual increase and the step increase on their anniversary. But I was just curious if that is like the recommended way to go for,
Let me interject and read this on page 25 of the document, section D at the very bottom. A review of market conditions shall occur every 3 to 5 years through the analysis of Bureau of Labor Statistics data and/or a survey of comparable jurisdictions. In addition, not less than every 5 years, City Council shall review the entire plan, including but not limited to classification descriptions, pay grades, point factoring, and the percentage and forms of all increases. So we're looking at this thing's going to be reviewed a lot. It's not going to be static.
Well, every 5 years I wouldn't exactly call a lot, but in reality,
it'd be horribly impractical to try to do what we're doing here every year.
Right.
I mean, because that's what we're going to be talking about 3 years from now. We're going to be doing all of this all over again.
I'm not suggesting that one way or
Whoever's going to be
another.
sitting in this seat, I don't know if it's going to be me or not.
I'm not suggesting that one way or another. If it was up to me, I wouldn't even put that in there. I would leave yourselves wide open, but you can change it whenever you want. You got 5 years to
I
take
think
it out.
it's a good idea. I think one of the problems the city has had in the past is we do a thing and we like it, it's good, it's set in stone, and we walk away from it and we forget about it for 10 years. And then a new council, new administration comes back and looks at it and starts all over again. It'd be the same thing as we did that with our streets, okay? Richland Avenue gets paved and we say, hey, it's been paved, forget about it for the next 10, 15 years. Well, we know what's going to happen in 5. We're going to be doing the whole thing all over again, right? Well, we better, because it's going to be full of holes and so on. So if we do that for our streets, we should be doing, have the same philosophy for our personnel. We have to review it.
And in reality, that was the policy, though it wasn't in the package, to do that every 3 years. It really was. And there were years I've been here, except for Debbie, longer than anybody else, and sorry, Debbie. But, we did do that. We did have a previous HR director who did do that every 3 years. And so it was our policy. This has not always been static and sitting there forever without anybody looking at it. And council essentially looks at it every single year. And I assume that will happen again this year. And if there are new positions to be created by the end of the year, that will happen. Or if a position is taken out, that can still happen as it is every single year. So
That's correct.
I'm not saying one way or another on
Right.
that, but I think out of fairness, we have done this many times. And that last time, that was part of the review with the previous HR director was, and changes were made that's kind of thrown, and the change was made and then it just going in one direction, and it was new and it just maybe wasn't handled quite the way it was meant to be, and that brought us to where we are.
Okay.
I
But,
do like the language about the 3 to 5 year assessment of market. I say that from having sat on finance and personnel, and we didn't have that information in front of us when we're sitting there thinking how much of a raise are we going to give our non-classified personnel in terms of raises. So I think that 3 to 5 is really, it should be 3, and looking at what's fluxing with the market in terms of jobs. It's not going to be the driver, but at least we're doing due diligence.
The way I read it is that, 3 years and no later than 5, so.
Right, but then council reviews no less than 5 for the entire package in its totality.
Oh, yeah.
So the thing is, you guys pass this every year, so if it just says every 3 to 5 years, should there be a date in there when we actually did the full thing, or is it going to be 3 to 5 years from next year when you pass it as is, or, anyway, do you understand what I'm saying? I'm getting a little picky here,
Well,
but
the clock
really,
would start when this thing becomes law.
yes.
Okay, so if it.
With the passage of the ordinance.
if
But when you
it's
pass
passed-
it yearly, then it's a new law every year. So you start your 3 to 5 years every year.
Well,
I get what you're saying. And who's tracking that 5 years? Where's the timestamp on the 5 years moving forward? But, yeah, okay.
Something to think about. Not everybody will be gone by then.
Beginning of first passage,
The-
July 1st.
Okay.
2016.
My point being, I do like I said,
It's a
and
happy
my office
reminder.
can start tracking that to where we're looking at market value of things 3 to 5 years. It gives us a 2-year window for doing it. But, yeah, the 5-year. Okay.
Part of an issue. So yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I'm anxious to see what you finally decide to do. I still am going to request some changes.
okay.
But all I can do is keep putting it out there for the good of my office. And
Well, let me ask my fellow committee member,
Yes,
okay? You comfortable? We'll introduce this on Monday?
I am, sure.
Okay. Miscellaneous, let's move on.
I had the Chief Reimer has requested, I believe I copied the auditor about the Walmart grant that he received for the purchase of fire extinguishers, asking for appropriation. I don't know if that has to come out of cap, reappropriating the cap, or how you do that.
Probably.
Okay. So he was successful in writing a grant and received.
I think fire extinguishers is a good idea.
Okay.
This is just another example of what I've mentioned to staff. Day one is that there is no grant. There are no grants that are too small. So this is a $1,500.
Fire extinguishers for the city buildings? No.
I think it's for a community endeavor.
Yeah.
And they're also going to seek it for the smoke detectors like they did in the past.
No, something like extinguishers in the municipal buildings, no, that's on it. We're buying those and having them inspected. No, this is for the community.
TV land and everywhere else.
Yes.
yeah, no, I'm fine with that. I had one other issue to bring up if you're done with that or whenever
Sure.
you're ready. And I think I sent this out a couple weeks ago. We thought we were going to meet last week. And it has to do with the percentages of how we charge people throughout the city. And this happened, I don't know if that was our engineer who requested it to begin with, or somebody else started the conversation as far as the splits with people in EPW, because they deal with, 3 different funds. And they asked for some changes. I haven't had time to look at anything new to see if those changes are written into the new staffing ordinance, which is the one we haven't talked about today. It's the one that lists everybody. But we are in favor of that, and people, the supervisors in the departments know better how much time people spend on, different.
It is in the.
It should be in this.
The EPW ones are, but the community center ones.
Well, then, then it made me think, because the 2 funds that struggle, because this will give a small amount of relief to the street fund, is by splitting that a little more equally with water and sewer for the people that work with all 3. So then I did ask the director of Arts, Parks, and Rec about his people, because there's a lot of overlap there. The director, the assistant director there are split, but it's not always 50-50, nor should it be necessarily. And so I asked, because of the difficulty with their budget, if he thought all of those were equal. And so he does have someone that I don't think is split. It's entirely in the community center and probably should be split, because that person does work, do youth programming, for the city, which isn't all inside the community center. It's also recreation. So I don't know if that's in there. I was actually hoping that we could put that through, same with EPW, and have it retroactive to January of this year to help the finances, because in reality these people have been doing that all along. But either way, I would request, as I said, and I did, I put it out there, that I talked to the supervisor first, and so there is a split there for one position that we would like to do. So that needs to be in that staffing ordinance, and that's if they agree.
No objection.
No, yeah, that's.
I don't know how to make it retroactive to January 1.
Well, it would have to be separate from this.
Okay.
It would have had to, already started through and put in there. Then when we adopted this, it would already be in there, but, that's however you guys progress with everything. But yeah, it would be fair. Yeah, it'd have to be a separate ordinance, so I think.
Okay.
But it would be nice, and it would be helpful financially for those departments, because it is the way it is. They are spending time on doing things that are paid for from other funds. I think that's it for me.
I don't know.
Other miscellaneous? You don't want to be that reluctant.
No, it's not that we're reluctant. I mean, nobody ever likes to talk about increasing taxes. But the income tax for the city, this discussion began last year under former Mayor Weil, has been at a frozen rate for a couple decades. As we've talked about.
1986 is.
Yeah. The increase in the enrollment, the increased burden on the city, just the growth of the city alone will merits to go forward in a full discussion on this in order to put it before the voters in the fall.
There's a lot to this. Obviously, the student enrollment at Ohio University continues to increase. It certainly has increased, which, again, is one other element of many that is further impacting our city services. So this is Finance and Personnel, or committee as a whole, not to speak for all the other committees, but council as a
Councilmember
whole.
Fall.
Every time we bring this up, I'm going to bring this up because it's a way of connecting what happens at the state level to what happens at the local level. The state has cut us back with the amount of money that we get in lieu of for the university, big time, over the last however many years. The local government fund has been radically cut back. The amount of money that we get from estate taxes has disappeared. There's several other areas that Columbus has cut local governments. Athens is one of many, 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 many municipalities in Ohio that have had to resort to local taxation to make up for the money that has been cut at Columbus. And a lot of that was for tax cuts for businesses and for people who are the upper percentiles in income tax. So people should know that out in TV land, and if you're upset that this has to happen, which I think all of us are upset, let the people up in Columbus know. I'm
Well
off
said.
my soapbox. But I will bring that up every single time.
Mr. Mayor.
I am in full agreement. As a matter of fact, I have the numbers in front of you. There's been a steady decrease in local government funds. From 2005, it was 812,000 and some, 815,000 in 6. And then from 2007, as I'm looking at this, it was just this almost linear drop to where we're now looking at, and this is 2014, and possibly the auditor can help me out, but I'm looking at 2014 as being $383,900 from what was 10 years prior, more than double that. And so this has just been a precipitous drop in state level funding for the local government. But that said, we're seeing a further stretching of our city resources, police, fire, litter control, and not to mention, and some of this is normal growth, but the growth of our green spaces in the city of Athens with the acquisition of not only Gwandy years ago, 2011 I believe, but more recently Dowler, and some possible further donations to the city in terms of land. It's getting bigger and bigger, and as we annex, again, I think it's been smart, very smart annexation, and not great annexation. We have been acquiring, consuming large swaths of land, but again, that further stretches our resources as well. Auditor Heck, I don't know if you, and I hate to put you on the spot, off the top of your head, know what our current 2015 local government funding.
I don't know it off the top of my head, but I could get it. Is that, you went through 14?
I went through 14.
Yeah, it has not, it won't be any more than 14 because it's steadily gone down, as you can see, for 10 years.
And I think over the next 2 years, after this two-year biennial budget, they're going to cut it like to zero. I think they want to get rid of it.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
Plus with the income tax changes, that's going to cost us money. Columbus has done everything they can to try to starve the cities and municipalities. And people can look across the state, and we can probably get it. I know the Municipal League put something out about how many towns and cities have gone for different types of levies and income tax increases because of what Columbus has done.
Well, and the levies and tax increases are a part of it, but there's also other ways that we could do this too, but other cities, and Nelsonville did this, is our credit to people who pay taxes in two different entities. Right. So if you live in Nelsonville and you work here, you have to pay their tax and ours. And we have a 1% credit because they pay taxes in Nelsonville. Nelsonville eliminated their credit this year, so they're giving no credit.
Way of doing.
So it's something we might have to consider.
Right.
Because as you said, we don't know about some of the other tax. We know we're going to lose money because the net operating loss forward. That's a benefit to businesses that we did not have. I recommended removing that when I came into office. So in 2005 we did, and now we're going to be back with a 5-year plan, that 5-year NOL that they can carry over. So we don't know the full impact of that. And of course that's all tax stuff, but some of the other things you mentioned, Member Fall, I just want to point out there, the impacted funds, which was pretty meager to begin with from the Board of Regents, is in half what it was when I started. And none of that has ever gone up, and it's not going to. The majority of those, the local government funds and those impacted funds, go into the general fund. And that's why I'm looking at our unappropriated balance in the general fund and thinking, we need to be more careful. We really do. That relies on those kinds of monies, tax money and state money, and as opposed to water and sewer funds who have service charges that they can get. And it's very limited. There's no service charges for what I perform, what police and fire perform. We rely on those funds, and when they cut them, and those are expensive operations in the general fund.
That you mentioned Nelsonville, the tax credit. I mean, I think that it could parallel what the increase is, so that is sustained as well. But I want to touch on briefly too capital improvements. We have been essentially bandaging things for years. Capital improvement, if I'm not mistaken, is what we're budgeting is about $300,000, and which doesn't allow us to do much with what has to be done, especially since we're all sitting in right now a building that is 1869 or 1868, but with renovations obviously that have taken place. But again, it's a building that also needs some serious attention. As Member Reisner's pointing to a leaking roof. It's also worth mentioning that the last income tax increase was 1986, as Clerk of Council and I were kind of scouring through trying to get our heads around that earlier today. But in terms of student enrollment, in 1986, student enrollment was 14,961, with incremental increases up until the present day, 2015, 23,306. So again, almost 10,000 students more in that period of time, but holding steady the income tax. But the services, when you look at I'll single out fire, with all the alarm calls that our fire department goes on, and unfortunately, or fortunately, a lot of them are false alarms. The vast majority are such, but that's still taxing our resources, and it costs money. If there's an elevator that's is inoperable and has individuals inside it that need to, we have to dedicate a pumper truck with crew until that someone arrives with corrective action for that. Well, that's money on the clock that we're just sitting there.
And communities, when it comes to those false alarms, have started charging for them. So, it's not that we would ever charge, because I think that's a really bad policy, but it's the continuation of increases on the city level from population and increases from students who aren't large taxpayers. They do pay income tax when they work in town, but most of them work part-time in that, in wage jobs. It would be nice if they got paid more, but that is a large increase in the continued decrease of funds from, and capital. How many capital projects have we gotten put into the capital budget at Columbus? I mean, we have our own. Zero. Debbie Phillips put a bunch in. She got zero funded.
The city of Athens put in, two proposals.
That was her district. They ignore us big time. So, people are upset about some of this. They need to contact their legislatures and the governor when he's in town.
I did run some numbers, and I'll put together a full spreadsheet for council to look at, 8.1, 0.2%, so that everyone can know. I'll throw this out now. I hesitate to, but I will. I was looking at, annual income of $50,000, and with a 0.2, it would currently at 1.65. Actually, we're under 1.75 with the pool, the Arts, Parks, and Recreation levy. But regardless, we're looking at under the 1.65, 1.75. It's roughly $800 a year. It would increase by roughly $100 to take it on up if we increase the tax. But I'll put together an entire spreadsheet so there's different examples that council and the community can also look at as we move forward.
Sounds reasonable to me. I just want to interject. I have a neighbor who works for the university, and he's always arguing about he pays so much in taxes. He's really upset about it, and his argument always comes down to, well, I pay more to the city than I do to the state. And I said, I don't think that's right. Oh, yes. And I go, well, give me an example. What taxes are you paying to the city? Well, your property tax is too much. And then I correct him. I say, well, we do not have a property tax. The county has. Well, it's all the same thing. It's all going in the same pot, and you're taking out this. And I go, no, it's not. I said, if you've got a problem with your property tax, go talk to the auditor of the county. I'll give you her phone number. But don't come to me and say I'm paying too much property tax and I should do something about it. And then he goes on, well, what about school taxes? Well, I go, what about them? What's it to me? Well, the city doesn't levy a school tax. Well, it goes somewhere. It's called a school district tax. You pay that. Well, I just think I'm paying too much. And I go, well, you could always move.
Member Reisner, I wouldn't go that far, but I will say, aside from the proprietary funding, we're talking sewer, we're talking water, we're talking parking garage, we're talking about other proprietary trash and recycling. The city of Athens, our budget is predicated upon income tax, and that's all it's predicated upon when it comes to.
But what about a sales tax?
That's accounting.
Oh, we don't have one of those either, do we?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. How about a dog license tax? Who gets that?
That goes to the city dog warden, which we have none,
We do?
because we don't get the dog.
Okay, you're
We don't
kidding.
get dog fees.
Okay. Okay, bring it forward. Take a look at it.
Thank you.
I like pie charts.
Can you also maybe do some comparables with other communities?
I've got it in front of me, but yes, I can.
Yeah, the Municipal League did send out something a month ago or something about how much a lot of the other communities in the state have been doing both income tax levy upcharges, and a lot of schools have been putting on more or trying to get up more levies because of the radical cutbacks. And that's all I can say is they're radical.
We've got all that information. As a matter of fact, I think we've got it all the way up through anything that was put through in 2015.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 12:22. If there's nothing more, we'll stand adjourned. We're adjourned.